A king called Eternal had a son whose name was Logos. They were enjoying wealth, power, great honor, and respect among their tributes and servants. The father's joy was in his son, and the son's delight was in his father. They had lots of servants, but their favorite one was the youngest, called Tiny. Father Eternal and his son Logos were particularly fond of Tiny because he was born in the palace and grew up there, so they loved him dearly and treated him more like a son than a servant. Then one day, Tiny went out in the garden of the palace to collect some flowers and make a lovely bouquet for the master.
Master will love these. What a beautiful red flower. Oh, and here's the yellow.
While he was choosing his selection and singing joyfully, a strange man, smartly dressed, sneaked in without anyone noticing. He was driving a very posh car, which he parked very close to Tiny, as he approached him, saying,
"Hey, little one. You've got a beautiful voice. What's your name?"
My name is Tiny, sir. Thank you for your kind compliment.
Let me introduce myself. I'm Hades. I'm an old friend of your master. I'm one of his main businessmen. I've just finished a big sale and I'll go downtown to chill out a bit. Would you like to come for a ride with me? I'll feel a lot happier if I had your company, so please be my guest.
But my master does not allow me out because I'm young and fragile. I might get lost or hurt. I'm allowed to go anywhere in this beautiful garden as long as I stay within the gates.
Oh, how cute. But you got no idea what you're missing, boy. Beyond these city old gates. Have you ever asked your master why he's not allowing you out? He just does not want you to have fun. Come on, grow up, kid. Isn't it time you make decisions for yourself?
My master loves me dearly, and he provides for all my needs. I lack nothing here. Please excuse me now, sir. I do not want to be late to my master. You must be missing me now.
You make me laugh, kid, as if your master even noticed your absence. What difference will it really make for him if you go out and enjoy yourself for an hour or two? Come on. Come on, my car is just here. Let's go.
Tiny kept resisting Hades' suggestions for a while, but after persistent nagging, he ran out of answers, so he finally accepted his invitation. As soon as he got into the car, Hades drove away with great speed heading towards the town. But it wasn't for an hour. Tiny was abducted by Hades and did not return home since. King Eternal sent all his servants to find Tiny, but they all failed. And one day, one of the servants came crying to King Eternal.
"My king, I have found Tiny in the town of beggars. I hardly recognized him. He was covered with bruises, his head was bandaged, wearing filthy clothes. His look was vacant. His countenance expressed great bitterness. Is that you, Tiny? Why are you sitting among the beggars while your king can provide for you and the whole town? Tiny, let's go back to the palace. King Eternal is suffering a great deal since you have disappeared, and how we missed your laughter and singing in the palace."
Tiny kept running away from me and screaming.
I don't know who you are. I don't know who is King Eternal. And which palace are you talking about? I'm not called Tiny. My name is Trendy. I always lived here in the slums. I work for a mighty man called Hades. And I'm his faithful servant now. Leave me alone.
But what happened to my precious Tiny? How could he forget my love? How could he forget his father, his master, his king?
Apparently, this is how Hades enslaves his victims. He seduces them with sweet words and false promises. Once they respond to him, he drags them in his car, beats them on their head so harshly that they lose consciousness. When they wake up from their concussion, he brainwashes them, strips them from all their belongings and destroys any documents revealing their real identity. Then he injects them with a drug called lustricine, which is highly addictive. Once they have it in their blood, they want more and more until they're completely addicted to it. Once they forget their identity and become enslaved to lustricine, Hades can take full control of his victims and can program them to worship and obey him alone. Eventually, they catch an infection and they die from terminal blood disease, cinephilia. Your Majesty, I'm afraid to say that Tiny is dying of cinephilia.
Logos was listening silently. Then he looked at his father and told him,
Father, let me go and save my poor brother Tiny.
But Master Logos, the people are violent, aggressive, immoral. They might not let you in because they hate strangers and they hate anyone criticizing their lifestyle. They love to live in vice and darkness, and they will not welcome you among them. If you go, Lord Logos, to these slums, you will surely be killed.
I will go in disguise. As a beggar, no one will recognize me as the king's son, but I must rescue Tiny.
Logos took off his royal garments and put on some rags, and went down to the beggar's town to find Tiny. At the crossing borders, he was stopped by the guards.
Hey you! Who are you? What are you doing here?
My name is Emmanuel. I have come to spend a few days with my brother Trendy, because he is dying of cinephilia.
Trendy? Alright, you can pass.
They let him in Hades' kingdom.
He walked through the dark streets and watched with great compassion how people are living in misery and severe poverty, how they were covered with filth, cursing and fighting with each other for one sniff of lustricine. He finally found Tiny in one of the slums. He was in so terrible a state, so emaciated, gasping for breath. He knelt down, embraced, and opened his bag, and produced his antiseptic wipes, and started cleansing his ulcers and dressing his wounds with such tenderness that made Tiny whisper, "Who are you?"
My name is Emmanuel. I have come to release you from Hades' bondage. Tiny, here, some water. You look so parched.
Tiny opened his tired eyes. He did not recognize Logos, but he felt overwhelmed by his love, so he drank. And Logos got him some bread and cut it into portions and offered it to Tiny, saying,
Here, some bread to give you strength.
Then he handed him a card.
This card is for you. Please open it.
Tiny sat up and opened the card and found pictures of himself with Father Eternal and Logos in the palace garden. Tiny looked at the picture with disbelief.
Is this me? I look so healthy, so happy back there. Is this the king? Why should he care for someone like me? And is this you, Emmanuel?
Yes, it is me, Emmanuel. My father sent me to get you back to the palace.
Logos started gently reminding Tiny who he is, what noble life he had before in the palace, the love he enjoyed from King Eternal. Gradually, Tiny's memory came back to him, so he wept, saying,
But how can I return to the king's presence when I'm so filthy? I'm unclean. I've cinephilia in my blood. I'm even no good for Hades. He has governed me. I'm left here to die.
Logos embraced Tiny and reassured him.
I will get you back to the palace and to my father, whatever it takes. Do you understand? Whatever it takes.
He then carried Tiny on his shoulders and asked about the nearest hospital. It was at the boundaries of the beggar's town, Calvary Hospital. As soon as they arrived there, he put Tiny, who was now struggling for breath, on a bed and went to discuss Tiny's condition with the doctors. The doctor said in dismay,
It is too late for him, sir. He is terminal. The only hope for him is to have exchange transfusion, where all the contaminated blood is drained out and replaced with clean, healthy blood. But unfortunately, we have no blood in the stores.
But you have a donor. You have my blood. I'm ready for immediate transfusion.
But sir, do you realize that in order to completely wash this wretched body from xenophilia, you will have to give all your blood in exchange, and eventually you will end up getting the infection and die?
I am fully aware of this, and I want to save his life at all costs, whatever it takes.
Whatever it takes?
Yes, to the last drop of my blood. But please, don't waste any more time. Let us complete this operation.
Logos lay down in a bed opposite to Tiny's. Then he stretched his arms wide open for the doctors to complete the transfusion. They inserted a cannula in his right hand, another one in his left hand, and a third one on his foot. And they did the same to Tiny, who by now was delirious, and the exchange transfusion began. As time was passing, Logos was becoming weaker as more and more contaminated blood took over his body. Meanwhile, Tiny was starting to revive on receiving the pure, healthy blood from Logos. After 3 hours, the operation was complete. Logos, who was shivering with fever, looked at Tiny, who had recovered, and smiled.
Here you are, my beloved Tiny, renewed. Tiny, I promise Father to get you back whatever it takes. So as soon as you're discharged, please go back to King Eternal, who is waiting for you, and give him this message.
Handing him a small envelope. He then breathed his last. His head dropped and died. The doctors came and disconnected the cannula from both Tiny and Logos. Tiny got up full of energy. He regained his beauty, his health, his memory, but he lost his friend Emmanuel, his Lord Logos. So he knelt down by his bed and started crying bitterly.
Emmanuel, my brother, Logos, my sweet Lord, why did you do this for me? Who am I to deserve your precious blood? I do not deserve such love. I, who disobeyed your commandments and doubted your love. I left the palace and King Eternal with my own will and chose to be a beggar in Cain's kingdom. I defiled myself with lust and braved myself with slavery. A noble one, how can I thank you enough? I owe you my life, my freedom, my dignity. Please forgive my pride and my ignorance. Please come back to me. I do not want to live without you.
And he kept weeping by his bedside until he fell asleep. When he woke up, he found himself still kneeling at the bedside. The envelopes Logos had given him had slipped to the floor next to his knee. It read,
Father, Tiny is saved. My mission is complete.
He looked up and found the bed empty. Logos' body was gone, so he started crying again and screamed at the nurses and doctors.
What did you do with my master's body? Where did you put it? Take whatever you want, but give him back to me.
But while he was still crying inconsolably, he heard his name being called.
Tiny, Tiny, I am here.
He looked behind him towards a beautiful voice and found Logos standing for him wearing royal garments. He threw himself at his feet and kept kissing them, and kissed his hands, stood up and threw himself into Logos' arms.
You're alive, my lord. You're truly alive.
Yes, my royal blood conquered the xenophilia cells and all its consequences. Let us go back to Father Eternal now.
They walked towards the palace. At the gates they met the servants who were rejoicing for the return of their master Logos and their dear Tiny. They They led Tiny to the guest house where he had a shower and put on new clothes. Then they entered the palace, where King Eternal was waiting with joyful tears in his eyes. Logos said,
"Here I am, Father, and here is my brother Tiny."
King Eternal embraced his son Logos, and then he lifted Tiny to his heart and called all the servants to come and celebrate with him, because Tiny was lost and now found, dead and now alive. Tiny looked at Father Eternal and at Logos at his right-hand side, and felt so ashamed of himself and so overwhelmed by their love. Then with difficulty, he managed to utter one word.
Why? Why did you go through all this trouble? Who am I to deserve such love?
Beloved Tiny, you are the apple of my eye. I missed you terribly. I missed your flowers and your beautiful singing around town.
I'll spend the rest of my life thanking you and singing your praises, offering the bouquet of my love and devotion.
البلاي ده ولا الاكت ده is one of the best I saw in my life. We should give them big hand. جماعة the way they present us salvation is amazing. يعني very practical. Very practical. يعني I was كده watching every part of it can be a sermon in itself. And it speaks about reality, مش كده؟ Could you find yourself in that or not? Could you find or not? How many could find themselves? صحيح. يعني every part كده. لما الاقي السينوفيليا دي اقول يا سلام. We have problem with sinophilia. مش عارفين بقى ابونا جون يقول لنا، ابونا يوحنا يقول لنا how to solve the problem of sinophilia دي. How to make transfusion, blood transfusion. ف صحيح يعني we are grateful to this group. طبعا طنط هبه كانت الدايركتور بتاعها. should give her big hand. It's beautiful and the effort. I don't know how could they collect all the material with the pictures. It is amazing. يعني I want to take it with me to Africa back كده. أوريها للناس في the end of the year تبقى big one, but I will not find the beautiful actors زي ما هما بيعملوا كده. It's hard. And the devil كمان يعني كل واحد فيهم كده كان doing it very well. Let us give them big hand. And let us not to forget that. يا جماعة, this is not a drama. This is the reality. This is the story of our life. And مش عايزين it's not fun. Actually, believe me, it is my condition. It is my condition. It is sad يعني how God. شوفوا بص ربنا بيعمل قد ايه. how أنا I don't care. بروح لفيرست بليس كده rubbish place to live there.